Hi, I'm Mary Bachinger, Director of Tax Policy at NACUBO.
I'm Bryan Dickson, Director of Student Financial Services and Educational Programs.
Our goal with this video is to share our interpretation of IRS reporting requirements for Higher Ed Emergency Relief Fund dollars, or HEERF dollars. There have been plenty of questions that have arisen about what gets reported, where, if at all, on the IRS Form 1098-T. Staff at institutions have come to us asking a wide variety of questions related to HEERF funds and 1098-T reporting. In response to the pandemic, HEERF monies have come out in three pieces of legislation, beginning first with the CARES Act last year, and finally with the American Rescue Plan, which was enacted earlier this year. Following the CARES Act, the IRS characterized student grants as emergency disaster aid, and therefore not income to the student and not taxable nor reportable. We also have IRS guidance from earlier this year telling us that the HEERF grants to students shouldn't appear on the 1098-T in Box 5 as grant aid processed by the institution. None of this aid for students would exist if not for the pandemic. Our approach is to read each iteration of HEERF grants, both student and institutional portions, as emergency aid and therefore not reportable on the 1098-T. The federal government doesn't appear to be characterizing those payments as traditional debt or loan forgiveness. The overarching goal seems to be that HEERF funds should be used to help students in as many ways as possible.
So there's one thing to keep in mind here, and that's all cash is green. So if a student makes a payment to a school for qualified tuition and related expenses, schools are going to report that as you always would. So just think of the student handing you cash or a check or making a payment with a credit or debit card. Any payment for QTRE, you treat that as you always would. So we're going to talk through 4 common examples of how HEERF funds are used to assist students, and we'll review the various reporting requirements, that is, if any requirements exist, and we'll also note the situations where there is no guidance from IRS on these as well. So the 4 scenarios are: with the student share, emergency grant provided directly to the student. 2, with the student share, the student electing to have the emergency grant applied to a balance on their account. 3, with the institutional share, dollars distributed to the student in the form of an emergency grant. And finally, 4, the institutional share, where the school pays down the student's account balance and counts this as lost revenue. So let's take a look at the first example, where a school distributes an emergency grant directly to a student using the student portion of HEERF. And the IRS has actually issued guidance on this. Those grants do not need to be reported in Box 5, where scholarships and grants are reported on the 1098-T. And since there is no payment in this scenario, Box 1 really isn't relevant. The IRS also notes that students don't need to include the emergency financial aid grants in their gross income, though again, taxability is not related to 1098-T information reporting. So now let's take a look at scenario 2, where a school is going to provide an emergency grant to a student using the student portion, but where the student elects to have the school apply the grant to a balance on their account with the college or university. The IRS guidance I just mentioned still applies here. There is no Box 5 reporting. However, if the dollars were applied to the student's account and paid for qualified tuition and related expenses, those amounts would need to be reflected in Box 1.
Now we'll review 2 examples using the HEERF institutional share. First, let's look at when the institutional share is distributed to the student in the form of an emergency grant. It is worth noting here that the IRS has not addressed this scenario. However, following the logic and rationale of the previous examples, NACUBO's interpretation is that HEERF grant monies used to help students should not appear in Box 5 of the 1098-T. As we mentioned at the beginning of this video, we're trying to think of all of this money through the lens of the COVID-19 emergency. These dollars wouldn't exist but for the pandemic. Further, since there are no payments being made to the institution in this example, as in the first example, there would be no Box 1 reporting here either. Finally, let's look at when a school pays all or a portion of a balance on a student's account. counts it as lost revenue, and reimburses itself using the institutional share of HEERF, which is permissible according to Education Department guidance. Since the IRS has not changed or updated their guidance after passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, we interpret this in keeping with previous guidance, noting that the emergency grant money to students should not appear on the 1098-T.
That's all we have, and we recognize that there may be examples and situations we did not explore in this video. In those cases, we recommend that you use your best judgment, again, keeping in mind that these are dollars provided to assist students and institutions during a national emergency. So carefully document your procedures and apply them as uniformly as you can. Should the IRS issue additional guidance related to HEERF 1098-T reporting, we will share that with you. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day.